Very dramatic developments. This is another significant setback for overseas media in China.
2 Australian journalists have now returned home from China after being embroiled in a 5-day diplomatic standoff.
Here they are, boarding their flight home. That's Mike Smith on the left. He works for the newspaper The Australian Financial Review. And that's Bill Birtles on the right. He's from ABC, Australia's national broadcaster.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And that dramatic escape from China by Smith and Birtles means that for the first time in almost 50 years, there are no reporters for Australian media outlets based in China. So why did they flee? Well, their decision came after a frightening knock on the door at midnight.
I had the 7 security police on my doorstep. They came into my home, read me out some documents outlining China's national security laws, and very alarmingly told me that I would not be able to leave the country.
That was Shanghai, and for Birtles, the same midnight message was delivered in Beijing.
Midnight? Why midnight? They knock on the door to say, we are from the Beijing Department of the National Security Bureau, and we're here to tell you that you are involved in a case. And for that reason, you are not allowed to leave China.
That case centres on another Australian journalist, Cheng Lei, a presenter on China's state-run English news service, who is in a dire situation after being detained without charge since August 14 on suspicion of endangering national security. But, as Birtles told the ABC, neither he nor Smith knows Cheng closely.
It seemed to me the two of us, Mike Smith and myself, were kind of odd people to interview or interrogate if it was really just about that case. So it sort of felt to me like the whole episode was about harassment. It felt very, very political.
Birtles and Smith are not the first foreign correspondents to be kicked out of China or forced to flee. In February, 3 journalists from the Wall Street Journal had their visas revoked over an article they didn't even write.
China is the real sick man of Asia.
That opinion piece was filed from Washington, not Beijing, and focused on China's financial markets in the wake of the virus. But the Chinese ambassador to the US said it was offensive and told Axios reporter Jonathan Swan a price had to be paid.
The Wall Street Journal ran an article with very insulting language on the entire Chinese nation. That caused a lot of anger among the Chinese people. So the government had to respond.
I'm sure people will disagree, Mr. Ambassador. I guess the question is whether it's a good idea to expel reporters because of something you disagree with.
The first question you have to ask whether it's a good idea to write such an article at all.
So, imagine what it's like for brave, independent Chinese journalists who dare to report from within. In a word, terrible. They face an unrelenting crackdown and often disappear or end up in prison. As Sophie Richardson, China Director of Human Rights Watch, told RN Breakfast.
Let's not forget people like, for example, Liu Yanli, a blogger who just this week lost an appeal against a 4-year sentence for being so bold as to say on WeChat that public officials should disclose their assets. You know, let's not forget about citizen journalists like Chen Qiushi and Fang Bian, who disappeared simply for talking publicly and on social media platforms about COVID in Wuhan back in February.
Fang Bian posted videos from Wuhan in early February revealing the truth about the coronavirus. But only days later, he was expressing fears for his safety. Fang Bian hasn't been seen since February. And nor has Cheng Qiushi, another citizen journalist reporting from Wuhan. According to Reporters Without Borders, China ranks 177 out of 180 countries on the world's Press Freedom Index. In other words, only 3 are worse. And the Committee to Protect Journalists says China leads the world in jailing journalists, with at least 48 imprisoned last year. And let's not forget China's growing crackdown on the media in Hong Kong. So, given that appalling record and Australia's relationship with China in the deep freeze, how long before Smith, Birtles or anyone else for that matter can safely return to China? No one's sure. It could be months or even years. But as the ABC's Gavin Morris says, much will be missed by not having Birtles in Beijing.
China, understanding China, the relationship between our two countries is probably the biggest story of our time, and having our people on the ground working with our local team to tell that story is absolutely critical to the ABC.
That Australian reporters no longer feel safe to do that signals a remarkable collapse in relations, given that President Xi Jinping was addressing a joint sitting of the Australian Parliament only 6 years ago and assuring us,
I am confident that with our joint efforts, the friendship between Chinese and Australian people will span over mountains and oceans. Such friendship will withstand rain and storm and be as strong and everlasting as the majestic Uluru Rock in Central Australia and the Great Wall in northern China.
That promise is not looking quite so good at the moment. But now, let's come back home to Melbourne, where the Premier Daniel Andrews was hammered by the media last week after extending the state's COVID lockdown.
Grim road to freedom.
Slow, steady strangulation. Dan Andrews is blasted for kicking the guts lockdown extension.
It was almost a unanimous verdict, but despite all the negative headlines, most Victorians last Monday were still behind their Premier.
But a 9news.com.au poll found overwhelming support for the Premier's plan, with 71% of almost 140,000 respondents saying extending the lockdown was the right decision.
That 9news poll showed almost as much support as Andrews had picked up from this Roy Morgan survey 10 days before. But come Tuesday evening, Chris Kenny had a scoop for Sky viewers with news of a dramatic reversal.
I want to show you an online survey. It's run on Twitter, which normally you wouldn't pay any attention to. But this is run by the Age newspaper, and it asks people if they support the Andrews government's roadmap out of lockdown. And almost 84% of people say no, they don't. This is the Age on Twitter. So you'd think it's a sample that's as left-wing as you can get, as supportive of Daniel Andrews as you could possibly imagine. And they are emphatically opposed to the Andrews plan.
Wow, an incredible result. So, how did sentiment turn round so dramatically? Well, it wasn't long before we found out from an Andrews supporter, PR Guy 17, claiming
Chris Kenny has been sucked in by the Age poll, where around 70,000 to 80,000 fake no votes were purchased to flip the result.
And how had he come to that conclusion? Well, he'd analysed the pattern of voting and found massive irregularities.
The Age poll tracked 70% yes, 30% no, and performed normally with votes trickling in. Then yesterday, a sudden spike of 15,000 no votes occurred in a few seconds.
PR Guy, who's clearly a passionate and dedicated Andrews supporter, backed that claim with a number of screenshots, including this pair taken 16 seconds apart, in which 13,000 votes suddenly landed. And he was not alone in crying foul.
Hey, The Age, this poll went from 55% yes to 65% no in a matter of seconds. These things are never scientific, but you may want to check in case you've been subjected to a bot attack.
Another tweeter, PT user, was also tracking irregular voting patterns over 24 hours. And as you can see from this graph, there were times when huge numbers of no votes surged in. More than 12,000 between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. on Monday, and another 11,000 between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m, then over 50,000 in the last hour of the poll being open. So, how could that have happened? Well, the only way to get thousands of votes in seconds is via Twitter bots. And amazingly, you can buy them on the net from sites like this one in the US.
Are you looking to get more votes for a Twitter poll? If yes, then you've come to the right place. We can deliver any number of votes fast and at most affordable prices. Thousands of clients have already won Twitter polls using our service.
Buy Twitter poll votes will deliver you 15,000 bot votes for $495 US and 20,000 for $660 US, at which prices the Age poll could have been gamed for around $2,000. So, who would have done that? Well, we have no way of knowing, and we're not pointing the finger. That is not to say there weren't some on Twitter trying to rally votes against Andrews, like this guy called Rise Up Melbourne.
Smash this poll, people! Even Four Eyes Chinese friends can't help him now.
And so was a prominent New South Wales Liberal, George Sabo, president of the party's Roseville branch, who tweeted this plea from his law firm's account.
To all my Conservative followers in the USA, please vote no and retweet. The state of Victoria is being destroyed by the most severe lockdown in the world.
The Age eventually took the poll down, with digital editor Matthew Dunkley telling MediaWatch,
in light of what appeared to be a clear manipulation of the poll by someone who may have been using a bot to change the result, we made the decision to delete the poll.
Now, amazingly, after all this was exposed, exactly the same fate befell Channel 9's online poll, after it ran on the TV news, which suddenly turned from 69-31 in favour of the lockdown to 65-35 against. And once again, the voting pattern reveals a huge spike in the no vote, with 150,000 coming in just 3 hours on Wednesday, as the yes vote flatlined. So, this poll was quite clearly hijacked too, and Channel 9 duly took it down as well, telling MediaWatch,
our dev team investigated and then quickly confirmed tens of thousands of votes had been cast over a short period of time from the same IP address, which indicated bot activity.
Channel 9 has no idea who is behind the hijack, but one thing is clear. You can't trust open online polls, even if the result does suit your agenda. And speaking of that, has Sky's Chris Kenny set the record straight and apologised to viewers for misleading them? No, he has not, or not as far as we can see. But now, to yet more media carnage and tearful goodbyes at Channel 10.
Thank you for welcoming us into your home each weeknight. It has been such a privilege.
It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be a part of your lives for 25 years.
To all of the South Australians who've tuned in to get their news from us over that time, thank you. And good night.
Last Friday saw the end of 10's locally presented news bulletins in Perth, Brisbane and Adelaide. And those cuts come as part of a much larger overhaul, which is why long-time Melbourne weatherman Mike Larkin has also left, as has Sydney's Tim Bailey, who's been with 10 for 29 years, and Perth's Michael Schultz. From today, Adelaide viewers will have their news hosted by Jennifer Kite in Melbourne, while Brisbane viewers will have theirs read by Sandra Sully in Sydney. And Perth viewers will have their news read from Sydney too by Narelda Jacobs. 10 told us last month the changes were painful but necessary, and insisted the audience do not need to worry.
While our viewers in Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth will see some on-air changes, we will continue to produce local news and employ local reporters, camera operators and production staff in those cities.
Now, if you think you've heard that sort of promise before and you're sceptical, we do not blame you. So how will 10 put out multiple news bulletins from a central location? According to former Studio 10 boss Rob McKnight, it's going to be a mix of live and packaged news, which may or may not be up to date, depending on where you live.
During daylight saving, Brisbane will actually have to record their segment at 3 o'clock local time. So all those reporters, all those stories will be recording at 3 o'clock, which means the news that they air at 5 o'clock will be 2 hours out of date. You know best, more than most, how fast news can change within 2 hours.
10 says that's not accurate, but won't tell us why. And it sounds like a schmozzle, although Perth will get its bulletin live. And not surprisingly, viewers are already giving the news the thumbs down.
Hasn't worked in the past and won't work now. South Australians want to see their local news from local people.
I'm so angry and sad that Channel 10 are dropping the local Brisbane news bulletin. How can the Sydney bulletin possibly do justice to Queensland?
I won't watch an interstate bulletin. It's bad enough on weekends. This is devastating.
And one might also ask, as does former 10 News exec Rob McKnight,
what could possibly go wrong?
To which the answer is quite a lot, if your news is up to 2 hours old. In 2017, we highlighted a terrible blunder at 10 when it failed to report on the tragic death of an 8-year-old girl, telling viewers she was still alive.
8-year-old Anita Board is in a critical condition after slamming her dragster into a cement barrier.
The little girl, who just turned 8, is fighting for her life.
That happened because Perth was getting its news bulletin on delay from Sydney, and they did not update the story. With these latest changes, Adelaide and Brisbane now also run the risk of embarrassing incidents like that. We'll see how they go. And finally, on the subject of media farewells, there's been an awful lot of them here at the ABC.
And we finished tonight's program on a very sad note. This week, the ABC's The Business team loses 3 of its best. The man behind the camera, our executive producer Simon West, finance correspondent Philip Lasker, and senior business reporter Andrew Robertson.
That is 70 years of combined experience in finance journalism walking out the door, and they're part of the 250 redundancies which make up the latest ABC budget cuts, which include well-known names like Brisbane's Dominic Schwartz, Melbourne's Karen Percy, Sydney's Ben Worsley, the Riverina's Moira Shields, ABC Radio's Elizabeth Jackson and News Radio's Sandy Aloisi. There are simply too many ABC journalists and crew leaving for us to name them all. But Andrew Geoghegan, who signed off for the final time 2 weeks ago, summed it up perfectly.
Newsrooms across the country are losing vast amounts of experience, and that doesn't bode well for a strong and independent media sector, one that needs to be well funded. So please keep watching, listening and reading trusted news sources, because quality journalism depends on your support.
For all those leaving the media industry this year, we wish you the best. That's all from us tonight. There's more on our website, including statements from 9 and 10. And don't forget, Media Bites every Thursday on your favourite social media platform. But for now, until next week, goodbye.